Welcome to the ones who are just joining us. It's been a really great session so far. In the first part, we learned about how we can challenge our mindsets and what mindsets even are with our let from the Dominican Republic. Right now, I am joined here by Liz from Arkansas in the US. And we are going to have a little chat about innovating for good and for everyone, which I'm super passionate about this topic. So Liz, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to the audience and just let us know a little bit more about you.
Well, first of all, thank you for the honor of being here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation, Sandra. And I wish I could be in person with all of the other innovators. I was just commenting how I miss that creative energy that comes from in-person meetings. So hopefully someday soon. But by way of introduction, I'm Elizabeth Willette Murchison. Everyone calls me Liz. I have many hats, like I would say most middle-aged women do. I'm a mother of 3 special needs children. I'm a wife to a Black man in American Arkansas, which has its own fun nuances. I am an Army veteran and served for 11 years in the military. And I've worked across multiple industries in this innovation for good sort of sector across fast-moving consumer goods, big tech like Amazon. I've worked then in philanthropy for an organization by Howard Schultz and Sherry Schultz and their Family Foundation for Veterans Philanthropy. And I've had my go at my own startup. So multiple industries, multiple experience, and I've been at Walmart for about 4.5 years, where I've been leading our strategy about how we can innovate for good, using our Walmart.com and omnichannel platform to engage customers and associates in that vein. And most recently, I'm moving over to a new business development role here at Walmart, where I get to flex that muscle in a new way.
So exciting. And yeah, thank you for being here today and for sharing all of this experience. Now, I don't have as much experience as Liz does, so I've been working in innovation for almost 6 years at this point. But if you look in the chat, dear audience, we did launch a poll. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how much experience you already have in innovation. And, no judgment here. If you've worked in it all your life, that's perfect. If you're just interested and want to find out more about that now, that's exactly what this event is for. So please just let us know. And Liz, you have 2 huge fangirls here. One from Little Rock, and the other one is saying that there's 2 Arkansas girls here. So that is really great to see that there's a whole community out there. So people are giving us the answers already. There's 23% of people who've been working in innovation or who have less than 1 year of experience in innovation, 23% between 1 and 3 years, 23% between 3 and 5 years, and then 31% are actually very knowledgeable and have more than 5 years of experience in innovation. So it's a very diverse audience, which I think is quite exciting. Yeah, as always, dear people out there, feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along. I will try and incorporate them into our conversation here. And you can, of course, also ask Liz during the roundtables later on. So let's not just focus on innovation. Let's focus on innovation for good. Liz, weird question, but why should we even do that? Why should we innovate for good? Why should we innovate for everyone? And do we even need corporations for that? Do we have governments for that? How's that going?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm a little bit of a contrarian, so my question is, why would we not innovate for good? I feel like our planet is in crisis. We have social issues abound. There's a lot of global issues. And while we can innovate for lots of different reasons, I would posit most business reasons they would call their reason good. I think you can take that same lens, that same architecture, and really think about how you can apply a shared value approach to think about triple bottom line impact for companies. And so I guess the why is, why not? I think our country needs it, our people need it, the globe needs it desperately. And there's a unique position and power for companies to use their assets and take an asset-based approach to drive innovation for good.
Absolutely. Now, there's this common belief that when you do that, you just spend money, right? So many corporations tend to do that when they're actually profitable right now. So, why do you think that is? Like, do you think that innovating for good is something that is contrary to being profitable, or how would that work? How have you seen that work?
Yeah, I think innovation for good is a big nebulous term that can be used to describe all sorts of innovation. So maybe I'll focus in on kind of an accessibility example of how accessibility is actually good for business. So, you think about an elevator, for example, and going into a department store, that can help moms who are a target enter into a department store and access multiple levels and be able to go in and have better shopping experiences, stay longer, spend more, is an example. So an innovation doesn't just have to be cost-based for things like accessibility, but it can also have another effect. I'll just use an example that I'm doing for here at Walmart. So there are 1.5 million nonprofits in the US. They are about a $400 billion business in that goods and products are sold to nonprofits into communities. So I made the case at Walmart of we should really be focusing on nonprofits as a customer, as a unique place of like, we want to drive good for them because they're doing good in communities. It was also about the business case of, and it could be profitable for us at the same time. And we know that nonprofits have a sphere of influence of people that they serve, but also that they influence as to a company's reputation or where they should go shop or using omni-channel tools. And so for me, making the case of innovating for good within Walmart was really simple because there are people who do good. We have a corporate social responsibility mandate. We want to be preeminent leaders of being good stewards in our community. And part of that is by serving them better through business. And in the long run, it will serve our business as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's as one looks at doing for good opportunities, it's not just about the cost that it takes to do good. It's not just a cost center. And I think, Sandra, I've had these conversations like on other areas. Oftentimes, corporate social responsibility will sit within a wheelhouse of marketing, or it will sit within a wheelhouse of employee engagement because it's an employee factor. But if you set corporate social responsibility as a core tenet of your company, then innovation itself should be a part of that, of driving good by the way you operate and by using innovation approaches and using agile approaches and Scrum-based approaches to use technology to unleash that. Has paid dividends for us.
Absolutely. And that's really something that I'm seeing across our client base as well. So we work with these very large corporations that have thousands of employees around the globe, right? So innovating for good is really different depending on your reality. It depends on where you are in the world and what problems you are facing at that point. And so some of my clients, when they tell me, oh, but we want to innovate for all of the 17 sustainable development goals. Like, this is not Pokemon. You don't have to catch them all. It's not this kind of game, right? This is really about looking at your core product, your core service, your communities, your reality. What is your product doing? How is it impacting your surroundings, social and environmental? And what can you do? What can you change at the core of that to really make sure that this is beneficial, that it is doing good and it's not doing bad? And so one example, for example, would be Velo, one of our German customers. They produce pumps. So they are focused on 4 specific sustainable development goals. One of them being gender equality, yes. So they have just empowered one of their women to do a YouTube channel, Women in Tech, specifically for, she's from Ethiopia, so it's specifically for an African female base, to empower them to go into tech and to be more knowledgeable around that. But that's not their core. That's one of the side effects, so to say, of their sustainability initiatives. What they do at the core is they produce pumps. So they really care about water, about drinkable water, about delivering that, about sanitation, about these kinds of goals that everybody around the world, wherever they are, and they can be for-profit or non-profit customers, that is what they're innovating for. That's how they want to make sure that they're, doing good for the world, and it's their core product. And that is kind of like the ideal scenario that we want to see there, right? We don't want to see like an add on the side CSR marketing activity, with all the benefits that we see from there. But we don't want to just have, oh, here's a paycheck now that we have money, but as soon as we're in a crisis, we're going to stop all effects and we're going to go back to the way that we did business, 30, 50 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting nuance. I've seen numerous examples where companies will poll their associates about what do you care about? And they're trying to develop an employee engagement program. But oftentimes what I care about personally as an associate isn't what I would expect my company to do with the things that it has. So I'm a veteran. I love veterans causes. I support them. I have a son with autism. I support those. I don't expect a retailer to necessarily support those. Maybe they would offer a discount or something else, but I wouldn't necessarily imagine that to be their core capability. Now, employee advancement programs for frontline retail workers, yeah, that's a core competency of like, it benefits you, you have a unique capability, it's core to there. And so I think oftentimes innovators steer away from things that they feel like are corporate social responsibility or engagement programs because they're like, well, that's not me, we don't do that. But I think if you can flip the narrative and say, what do we have unique to us that could also be of benefit to society, the world, or some other unique problem that could also drive good, you're starting from an asset-based approach that is just leaning into helping versus one that's like a deficit and like, what's our right to own that space or make a difference in that space. So I think everybody who sits in an innovation capability or capacity could really be thinking about how could they use that for good and how could they pitch it differently.
I absolutely agree with that. Still, one of the reasons why we founded Women in Innovation specifically was that in those innovation capabilities, we don't see oftentimes the diversity that we would like to see. We see that it is often very male oriented. And so that is something that I think is really interesting because I'm kind of like the intersection, right? I work very deeply in the field of innovation, but I'm our head of sustainability. So I also interact with the sustainability managers, and a lot of them tend to be female. And so that is a very interesting balance, but a lot of them tend to be super separate. So you have your innovation capabilities in your company, you have your sustainability capabilities. They don't necessarily talk. They're not necessarily friends or allies or whatever you might want to call that. And that is something that just now we see coming up more and more, that sustainability and innovation are actually linked, and sustainability, like a part of that, is also gender equalities. It's reduced inequalities, so all of like marginalized groups, etc. So is that something like, how do you see that when it comes to more social innovation? Do women play a different role in that than they do in traditional innovation, in your experience?
So yeah, yes and no, and I'll speak to both sides of it. So I see overall that there's a lack of women in tech innovation spaces. I see there's a lack of them in operational, oftentimes, spaces. I've witnessed it across the military. I've witnessed it when I went to MIT, where less than a third of the class was female, and there inherently is technology and innovation. And there are a multitude of reasons why that exists. I think age, demographics, gender roles, identities, how women are groomed, a whole host of activities fit in there. And where I've seen more women rise in this intersection of social impact space has typically been in HR, social impact, like philanthropy roles, marketing roles, where for a number of reasons that I can't wholly name or pretend to know all of the reasons why, we see greater numbers of women in those type of roles. I don't know if whether it's groomed, whether it's, I can see somebody like me, so I go to it, whether it's they're getting more acceptance into those roles. I can say I've always gravitated toward the kind of innovation space and have been shocked that there aren't more women. And I would say one of the things that I've seen recently, even at Walmart, is that we had in our philanthropy roles, a majority of the people in those roles were female. And we had a tech support group, majority male. And even the people who are like collectively like in this space of like, let's go do good. The tech roles were typically in the male and the female roles were over here. And I've seen that change even over the 5 years that I've been there. But that has actually been through conscious identification that we need to change this. Like conscious identification that why don't we have other women in these roles? Like let's recruit for there. Or on the philanthropy side, why don't we have more males in this? So I can't comment on like exactly why that is, but I can say that I've witnessed it, I've observed it. I feel like for any role, diversity matters. Whether it's gender diversity, ethnic diversity, racial diversity, diversity of age, diversity of abilities, all of those things make an experience so much stronger in how you're innovating, because there's no way one person through lived experience, and I'm a big believer that lived experience is one of the best predictors of future success. And through that lived experience, we can offer a lot of innovation just by different perspectives. So that's
absolutely. So just to get you a little bit more involved, dear people out there, we have just launched a poll. And so we want to know from you, do you think that women are represented enough in innovation? So we've both kind of shared our own personal experiences. Now, of course, that we can discuss whether that's statistically relevant or, what we're seeing right here. But fact is that Liz and I together have, a lot of different experiences in there, and we do see kind of the same trend going on. So let's see what you think. I'm just going to give you a couple more minutes here just to share some of that. So yeah, I think that what you were saying is absolutely right. And I think we often talk about diversity and we mean gender diversity. A lot of that is what companies focus on, right? So we do see programs that are about, making sure that there's more women in leadership and having these kinds of mentor programs. Not all organizations, like we're very far from that, unfortunately, but still we do see some of that, but we don't see as much when it comes to age, when it comes to, just different backgrounds, and most of all, when it comes to different abilities, then that is really something that across my entire client base, I see so rarely, unfortunately, because it is something that we can really benefit from, because we all, like you were saying, bring our problems and then we try to solve these problems, right? So you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't have the people who show you what you don't know, you can't even solve that problem. So that is something that I think is so important to bring up and to mention. And yeah, it seems like the audience is really agreeing with us. So it's 100% no, women are not represented enough in innovation. So thank you for your opinion with that. Now, Liz, before we were talking a little bit about, CSR, having marketing related budgets that only kind of show up once companies are doing well. Tell us a little bit about Walmart. Like, how does that work? Is that kind of a more integral piece of it? Do you have a big CSR initiative? How is Walmart giving back to communities, or kind of like, what's the whole deal behind it?
Thank you for the question, because I will wholeheartedly admit 5.5 years ago, before I even considered working at Walmart, I didn't shop at Walmart because I had all of these preconceived notions about who they were as a company, what they did to the world, what they did to environment, what do they, are there must be bad employers because I see headlines about it. So I'll tell you some of the facts that kind of helped switch my perspective, and not only switched it, but made me like a true blue Walmart advocate and a changing it from within to say, we do a lot, but we can do more. So Walmart is a Fortune 1 retailer. We're the largest in the world. We employ 2.4 million people globally, 1.4 million in the US. And to put that in equivalent terms, next to the Chinese military and the US government, there's no larger employer in the world. So from a social responsibility perspective, like there's that. We employ more people than anyone. But I think it would surprise most people to learn that globally we give 1.4 billion with a B dollars in cash and in-kind gifts into communities around the country. That's a lot of money. If you think about that's bigger than a lot of Fortune companies themselves, and what we give into our into communities. So I think that's one piece, and that is the rolling average over the last 5 years. But since our beginning, it's been part of the remit of the company, and the company was actually designed, believe it or not, with this social impact mantra. So Sam Walton wanted to set up Walmart in the middle of heartland America, where there was a lack of access to resources at affordable rates. And his goal was to develop the largest retail chain that through scale could reduce costs so that everyday Americans could save more money and live better lives. And to this day, that is our mission, to help people save money and to live better lives. And it's endemic in everything that we do in driving down costs. And in fact, in 1990, Sam Walton received an award for single-handedly through Walmart reducing inflation in America, which is amazing to think about. Like, and in this time of new economic recession, or not recession, but in this new time of inflation, thinking about the unique role of Walmart to deliver that into communities. So we have 4 key pillars, and then I'll cede my time, but we focus on sustainability, opportunity, community impact, and racial equity. We have a new Center for Racial Equity that's set up. And that's both our philanthropic and our core business capabilities. And we put this in our strategy. And last year we announced it, that our corporate mission is now to be the top preeminent regenerative company. And so everything that we do is not just about philanthropy. It's deep in our operations. It's in our innovation. It's in our HR remits. It's part of every core piece. And it's not just a side activity that happens over here about CSR.
Great. Yeah. And that's something like how we would want to see that, right? So this morning we had a conversation, or I had a conversation with Mariam. So Mariam is from Saudi Arabia, and she used to work as the chief sustainability officer at this very big conglomerate. And they also have like a philosophy that kind of reminds me of what you're just saying right now. So you can basically imagine this triangle. So you have the earning part of it, which is profit and making money. And it's the basis of why the company keeps existing, right? So we also have to put it that way. Then we have the sustaining side, which means that sustain operations, sustain the business itself, but also sustain people and planet. So it has like all of these sides to that. And there's a whole giving side to the triangle. So the giving side is always incorporated in everything. And so this is really about, donating, yes, but not one-off donation. So nothing that is just a one-time thing, but it's always about like constantly doing that. So one of the examples of like what they do is they have this like virtuous cycle is what I would call that. So they're raising chickens with one of their companies to, of course, then slaughter them and to sell them. And so you have to imagine that Saudi Arabia it's a desert country, right? So there is not a lot of water and everything. And so the ecological impact of a lot of things is very severe. So what they did is that they actually planted, or they're doing that as an ongoing activity. They're planting 1 million trees around the capital, which is called Riyadh. And those trees are growing up. They're taking then the shavings of the trees to feed them to the chickens. The trees themselves are protecting the city and creating a better climate around that to protect from sandstorms and everything there. They're raising the chickens with that. And then they take the chickens and they sell them, you know, and for every 4 baskets, for every 4 chickens that are sold, they're donating a fifth one to one of the poor families in their community. So they're taking this like whole approach of ecological protection through the trees that they have. They are reducing costs, though, to feed their chickens because they used to import these things from other countries because that just didn't grow in their own country. So they're reducing that, and they're giving back to the community by continuously, always for every 4 chickens, they are always donating a fifth one. And in addition to that, people can also buy that. They can also say, hey, I'm buying one today, but I'm also buying a voucher for, the next person who's coming who can't afford this, to feed their communities. So to me, that is really something where corporations can make such a huge difference without having to pass on any of their profit or like not make money with that, because it's so integrated in this whole process that it's not just like an additional thing. So that is something that you made me think of, like with that whole philosophy of like continuously always giving and just making that a part of your, like how you do business, right?
Right. Oh, it reminds me of some of our core competencies that your audience might know, and I don't lead this, but it's part of our remit too. Is like we took a look at our position as, well, we have a really large supplier base. So what could we do to change standards as a buyer that then sells products on to other folks? And so we implemented something called Project Gigaton, which is our a commitment where suppliers come in and say that we're going to remove a gigaton of carbon emissions from our planet, and we have progress reports that go out and standards that happen, and that's to increase our capability to say we can influence these suppliers on their goals to reduce carbon. So that's an amazing one. And then we look all the way upstream at things like our sustainable tuna supply chain and our sustainable shrimp supply chains, and what are both the social and ecological marks that we're going to put, and how can we be, MSC plus, or some of these like standards in our own operations, because we're the largest white label producer of those things, or seller of those. And so as we look at all of the suppliers that feed into that, we can set standards that then change the game of it. And so I think it's really important to do as they're doing, take this asset-based approach. You have a very big business reason for operating, but you can do so in a way that's very, very responsible.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about like the bigger structures of it all, right? Like how we can do that process wise and all of these things, but we can also do it focused on products, focused on specific designs where we say, okay, we're intentionally doing the product in a different way so that we can affect change. So audience, I'm going to give you an example, and I would also ask you to share an inclusive design or an innovation that was made for a specific target group, but that ended up, beneficiating a lot more people than that. So one of my personal favorite examples, or I actually have a lot of them, but let's focus on this one product, is that Unilever, they produce like a lot of fast moving consumer goods. They had this deodorant made that you can open with one hand. So a lot of the time, if you think about it, you take the lid off, you use 2 hands, right? Then you spray. Okay, that's great. What if you don't have 2 hands, right? Then it's kind of difficult to pop that lid off. And it's just like, how can I get this done? You might want to try to open it in a different way. It's really annoying. So they made a design specifically for that use case so that you can open it with just 1 hand. But now, of course, that is something that I also think could benefit me in my life when, I don't know, I have a broken hand or something that might just be a temporary situation.
Or says for every mother holding a toddler trying to get ready for work in the morning, right?
Exactly. So that's one of my personal favorites. What about you? Like, what kinds of, like, do you think that's an important thing? And as we go, I'm also going to share some of like the audience's favorite designs and innovations.
Yeah. My favorite innovation probably of all time is closed captioning. It was made for the hearing impaired audience so that they too could read what is happening on TV. But I have toddlers and kids at home, and when they're being very loud, I love to have a TV on with the closed caption on the bottom. It's done a couple of things for our family. It's forced our kids to start reading, and so they'll read the words and they're picking it up, so they're expanding their vernacular. I can also tune in and tune out when I need to on when a show is on, but I can also be attentive to them without over blaring sounds. I also can edit things that I don't want them to necessarily hear just yet. And so to me, like, closed captioning was a huge technology, but I don't know if you do it. Like, I have it on my Zoom now where I've got the captioning flowing through right now. And it's very useful, especially like as things go in and out, or I can't always hear. And I really appreciate it too, because I didn't start out my life hard of hearing, but when I was in the military, I lost some hearing in my left ear. And so it's very helpful to me now. So things that were invented for one purpose, and it helped out with a multitude of things, and also translation services, et cetera. Think about how that one core technology unlocked so much.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. So I used to live in Boulder for 2 years, and I thought that one of the fun things there was, for some reason, I was always very drawn to a specific area in the city, like around the public library, for those of you who know Boulder, where, there's the Boulder Creek, and there's a nice little bridge, and there's a playground, and, you can play with the water, and there's like grass and everything. And I always felt very much at peace and energized in that part of the city. And so later on, I found out that what they actually did is that the city of Boulder ran what we would call an ideation campaign. So they asked kids between 2 and 18 for their opinions. What should your city look like? Like, what would you want there? Like, what would be good for you? And so they got a lot of different responses, and they thought like they were doing a good thing for the children, and that's fun. But it turned out that they were doing a good thing for the entire Boulder community, for everybody around. Because what you can imagine is that, teenage boy is going to be like, hey, I want my skateboard to be on a smooth surface so that I can just roll about, and it's going to be really fun. And guess who's also beneficiating from that? Wheelchairs, strollers, everybody who has difficulties kind of like walking or moving on uneven ground, right? So that happened. Kids asked for, well, I can't drive yet, so I would like to have bus lines. I would like to have public transportation so I can get places. Well, that's also true for somebody who cannot drive for whatever reason. Maybe you're visually impaired, maybe you have something else physiologically speaking. So that helps everybody, the elderly as well, for example. So there were like a lot of these examples where they thought, okay, we're doing this for our kids now, but really it was for the entire community. And you could feel it. You could really feel it, like in that part of the city. And I always thought that was something that was just so, so powerful. So let me share some of the audience's experiences and what they like to do that. So somebody is saying all OXO or OXO products, they're made for arthritic hands, and they're very convenient for all. So I can totally imagine that.
Love them.
Facebook was originally created for college students and was quickly adopted for all, which, yeah, that's totally true. I think the flexible straw was made to make milkshakes easier to drink, but now I think how helpful it is for so many situations. Absolutely. In Rare Beauty, they created the container top for those who have mobility or strength issues in their hands. The round top helps, but it is generally helpful for many different people, like mothers holding a toddler with one hand, like you were saying there. But then also work from home. Cuts carbon emissions for driving to work, provides flexibility for parents, work-life balance, etc. Yeah, absolutely. That is something that, many of us can benefit from. So I think that having these designs that were made for specific groups really shows us that we're just solving a problem that we maybe weren't aware of before, but that not just that specific group is facing, but that everybody else, or not everybody, but many others can also beneficiate from.
Yeah, I think It's so fun when you have like inventions or technologies. I recall back at my days at MIT, and we were focusing on, all these case studies of like, okay, if you had this invention, like this technology capability, how would you enter the market was the question. And so one of them that they used was from the company Ecstatic. So they had this silver thread technology that was used to help with bacteria with things. So like it had these properties of you could do it. And so you could take that concept and do all these sort of things with it. Like you could have, clean medical surfaces. You could make it into thread and put it into fabric. You could do all these pieces. And like the innovator's dilemma is like, who could we design for and where could we design our market entry for to solve the problem? And I think Ecstatic was a really amazing company because they said, who has a problem where they need to have prove out that they can wear socks for days on end, and we could prove the antibacterial properties. And so they worked with the military, and they ended up having like the most preeminent capabilities, and then we're able to go into hospital grade and medical grade and all these other things. But I think it was just a really fun example of like, if you could take the hardest problem you're trying to solve for, then you can lift it up, lift up your whole company. And I think that about things on like racial equity or others, like if the hardest thing to solve for an equity or is, serving a Black population because they're underserved for a number of reasons, if you can design for that particular problem set, or you can design for an accessibility perfect set, then you can unlock a whole bunch of other capabilities while solving a really hard problem and have even a bigger business case or halo to solve for. And so I just would challenge people as you're thinking about like what's next with my innovation or what's next with that, to think about what is the lowest base case denominator or like the most inclusive denominator that you could solve for in that innovation that might unlock future capabilities.
Absolutely. We have a comment to answer your story. Allison is saying, I work at a defense company and we are regularly looking for ways to bring military applications or capability to the commercial world and vice versa. Many success stories over our company history. It often just takes new perspectives and awareness of what is already available to build upon. And I totally agree. Like there's so much innovation that is happening that can be applied to different target groups, different markets, where you can just really expand it if you adapt it a little bit or just think of a different use case for it, right? So
yeah, like think about the internet, for example, invented for the military for secure communications in the 80s. And it took how long for the internet to like become this World Wide Web phenomena? But so many applications like that. And thank you for raising it because it's one of my favorite examples as well. As there's so much technology within the military that could be unleashed for good.
Absolutely. So I just want to encourage you, people out there, to, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Liz at this point, to just put them in the chat. We are almost at the end of this session, but I do want to give you that opportunity. If we don't answer all of the questions now, you can always go ahead and visit Liz at her roundtable. That's going to start in just a couple of minutes, but I do want to give you the opportunity to share some of your thoughts, maybe even some more or questions that you have right now. Just go ahead and put them in the chat. So we do have one more comment, kind of the opposite of what you asked, but I think of Band-Aid and their addition of more skin tones all the time. Does the use case of their product change? No, of course not, but so much more inclusive. And yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. And this is one of those things I talk about lived experience. Like as a white woman, I can appreciate just hearing that example. Having two boys of color, I feel it in a different way. Like I didn't realize the lived experience of that identity of feeling misplaced, like nothing fits you, nothing matches, it stands out. And the inclusivity of it, and then our brand loyalty to going toward a solution that helps them feel seen and protected and equal to everybody else is very important. And so I think this also goes to the listen to your entire audience, listen to your entire potential market user base, and you can innovate for a lot more than just something that might have a slight incremental cost to you, but pay dividends in other ways of loyalty. Like we will be loyal to Band-Aid brand for a very long time.
Absolutely. And we are, seeing some progress in that direction. And I really, really hope that we're going to see a lot more in that direction. So thank you, Liz, so much for sharing your professional experiences, for sharing your personal experiences, for being here with us today. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed this session with you.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate everything that you and Hike do. And thanks to everybody for listening to our spiel. Really appreciate it.